Well, hey there, Vikings. Welcome back to the playthrough. Apologies if you can hear my chair creaking underneath me. I don't usually record audio sitting down, so this is a first. And welcome back to the playthrough. We are on episode 6 today, and I just want to give you all a little bit of a heads up before we get started, which is that this episode is a let's build. We are going to knock down this tired old shack and build ourselves a nice big house. And yeah, it's pretty much just going to be 30 to 35 minutes of me just building and stuff like that. So, yeah, anyone who's not really interested in watching a Let's Build episode, then you might want to skip this one, or I will go over a few mechanics of building and stuff like that whilst we're going through it, but yeah, just so you're aware, we are going to be building for all of this episode, and yeah, so if you're not really interested in that, then you can always skip to the next episode where we will be cracking on with the next stage of the Meadows playthrough. But yeah, to get started, we're knocking down our old building, and as you can tell, I am knocking out the lower level of the whole building, and that is causing the upper levels to fall down of their own accord. It's just a bit of a time-saving thing that I do. It just kind of speeds up the process instead of having to manually look at each piece to knock it down. You can knock things down with your hammer, you don't have to use an axe or anything like that, and you do get your full crafting materials back for them, so if it was 2 wood for that wooden panel, you can knock it down and get the 2 wood back. And yeah, we're using the stability mechanic of building in order to knock that building down in a quick and efficient way, save a bit of time. And yeah, so first things first, for any building in Valheim, whether it be big or small, I would always recommend, especially if you want to have a floor, grab your hoe and start flattening the ground, which we will crack on with in a second whilst we finish removing the bits and pieces that we don't need, like the table upgrade, all that kind of good stuff. And let's start hoeing this ground. So, with hoeing in Valheim, I'm going to be honest with you, it's a bit of a pain in the backside. It's mainly because I don't fully understand the mechanics myself, although I have picked up a few hints and tips over the years that have helped me immeasurably when it comes to flattening ground and building and stuff like that. There is a specific YouTube channel I watch for their advice on stuff like this, and I will put a link in the description and mention them in a little bit when we're finished going over the stability mechanics and the flattening mechanics. So, with your hoe, one of the most basic rules you need to understand with hoeing ground is that the hoe is trying to flatten the ground to the level that you are stood on, not to the level that you're pointing at. So, when you hover over a certain level, you'll notice there's obviously the 2 circles on the ground where you're leveling it to, and you'll notice a line in the middle that's either going up or down. That line is indicating to you whether it's going to raise the ground or lower the ground and how far it has to do that. It's sometimes pretty obvious, sometimes it's not. The whole reason why I'm explaining this part is that I would definitely recommend when you start hoeing an area, stand in one spot and hoe quite a large area around you. Like pretty much every bit around you want to try and hoe, because what you're doing there is you're hoeing all the ground or flattening it to the level that you're stood on, and then you can start moving outwards from that area and hoeing larger parts or flattening larger parts of that area if you're building quite a large building, so obviously like I'm doing here. The reason why you want to do this is that if you just try and hoe in a straight line but trying to move left and right as you're doing it, if you're trying to flatten in a straight line and moving left and right as you're doing it, your character will start stepping up or stepping down depending on whether the ground raises or lowers, and then that hoe, the parts of the ground that you flatten will then try and be raised or lowered to the level you're stood at and not where you were started. Another quick way of doing something like this, or an easier way of doing something like this, is to put bits of wooden flooring on the floor and stand on that, start hoeing the ground around you and flattening it to the level that that wooden floor is on, and then start building along with the wooden floor to then flatten more ground nearby to then do a larger surface area. The reason why you do this is because when you're building a floor, you can snap it to existing bits of floor, which means that every piece you put down will be on the same level. So if you want to do like a nice flat long line, you can do a big long line of flooring that's all level and then hoe the whole area around it, or flatten the whole area around it, and that will majority get that ground to be the same level as the floor. Now, the reason why I say majority and not all of it is that the flattening ground mechanic is not easy to understand, because there are a couple of things that can happen. You can have bits of ground that are too low in order for the flattened ground mechanic to actually raise it up to the level that you're stood at, and there are bits of ground that have stone and stuff in them, which will cause them to have little bits that are sticking up. Now, these little bits aren't really that bad. You can ignore them if you wanted to, or if you can try and position your building so that they're just off in a corner somewhere, so they're not really, sticking out like a sore thumb. You could easily do that if you really wanted to, or the better way of doing it, but which takes a lot longer in terms of time, is to have a pickaxe and to mine those little bits of stone out. Now, you can't see the stone, but you can tell that they're there when there's bits of ground that are raised, even though you're stood hoeing it, flattening it over and over, and it's just not going down. That's the game telling you that there's bits of stone in that ground. You're going to have to grab your pickaxe and dig them out before you can flatten it properly. Now, I could go much more extensively into the whole flattening ground mechanics, but like I've said, there's a lot of them, and they are a bit of a mind boggle to try and wrap your head around it. So what I would say instead is to go and watch this particular YouTube channel that I have been watching for stuff like this. I've followed him or followed them since they started making Valheim content, since I started playing it, and I've always fully understood and enjoyed their advice and their videos because he's very good at doing it. And the channel is Kaizen, so that's Kysen. Again, what I'll do is I'll put a link to it in the description. Just give him a little shout out and go and watch his videos because I highly recommend them if you're looking for advice on building mechanics, flattening ground mechanics, stuff like that. He's got video tutorials and everything. I mean, this was the channel that I watched heavily in the lead up to Ashlands in terms of developer reveals and his thoughts on what might be coming and stuff like that. So yeah, I definitely recommend this channel in terms of Valheim content if you're wanting to better understand the mechanics of building. Now, one thing I did neglect to mention at the start of the video is that I have cut out a few pieces of this video. You will notice a couple of segments where the video will just cut to me running back to the building. I've basically just cut out the sections of video where I was just going off into the woods behind the house or behind the building to cut down more trees. The reason why I've done this is because I just didn't think that you guys wanted to sit there and watch me chop trees down for 10 minutes, which I think in total that was about the amount of time that I managed to save by editing that part, was just to cut it out and then put a little crossover bit between those two clips. So it's basically, you see my character walk away from the building towards the trees, and then it cuts to me walking back to the building from the trees, and I've just got a boatload more wood. I don't do anything else in those two parts. I have watched those clips and made sure there's nothing important in those parts. There's nothing that you might want to see in there. I just thought that I'd save a bit of time on the actual video length because I didn't want to split this build episode into two. I basically just want it to be, let's build our house or our home, and yeah, that was it. Just keep it as one episode. So now that we've got that covered, you can see that we're onto building the initial startings of our roof, and you can tell for those two sections I was putting up there that they were highlighting orange after being built rather than green, which means that they are built further away from the ground, which means that their stability is not as high. If I was to continue building a piece or two on top of those, they have a higher chance of falling down. And so we'll cover some of the stability mechanics now, which is that when you're building, the pieces of building that you're putting down have a stability mechanic. If that piece of building is connected to the ground itself, it will highlight in blue. You probably have seen it on a few of the pieces we've highlighted so far. And then any piece you build on top of that will have a lower stability, but it gets to a certain level when it's a guaranteed that anything you try and build on top of that will then fall off. So you can see that I'm highlighting some of the wood wall pieces here, and they're coming up as green rather than blue. It's because they're connected to the floor and they're connected to the wooden floor and not the actual floor, which means they're lacking a little bit of stability. Now, I'm not entirely sure exactly how stability works. Again, I'd recommend go and watch Kaizen and his videos on them. But I do know that it's not a guaranteed percentage chance that your pieces will fall down. So it's not like you're going to come home from a big farm and your building's going to have fallen down. But it's more a thing just to kind of indicate to you that this is how far away you can build. So the color scale goes blue if it's connected to the ground, it's the most stable. And then it goes green, yellow, orange, red, and then like a dark red. And then anything you build, I think even some of the dark red pieces will fall off as well. Anything you build on top of those red pieces will then just fall off straight away. They're not connected to anything that's stable, so they'll just fall. It's mainly used for roofs and walls, so just keep an eye out when you are building, especially if you're building quite a tall building, as to what the color of the piece of item, like wall or floor or whatever that you're building. Pay attention to the color of it so you know that the piece you're building doesn't fall off. You will notice in a little bit when we're kind of building the roof up a bit higher that we need to increase the stability of the high part of the roof as it just keeps falling off. I do also need to make use of other mechanics in terms of building and building stability by using these wooden poles which go from the ground to the roof in order to add that little bit of extra stability so they stop falling down. we do make use of that as well. There are also different materials that you can build buildings out of, which have higher stability. So stone is probably the most stable you can have. It's probably one of the best. Oh, there we go. You probably just saw that quick cut there, which was we had to leave to go and get some more wood, and we've just quickly cut back to when we're returning, because again, I didn't want to put 5 minutes of me chopping down trees. If you have to know, I think I fought one greyling in the whole time I was cutting those trees down, and that was it. So, just in case you really need to know what happened, that's what happened. We were cutting trees down, killed a greyling, and that was it. And yeah, so with the building stability, I highly recommend watching Kaizen's channel on watching his videos on that as well. If you want to get a bit more of a better understanding, there are different materials that you can build buildings out of that increase the stability, so you can have really tall towers if you would like. It will take a bit of time, and you will have to shift certain tables and materials up and down in order to make sure that you can build it that high, and obviously make sure you keep keeping an eye on the stability of those building pieces before continuing, so that it's not all going to fall down on you. But yeah, there is a way that you can build tall buildings, and you can use other materials and stuff like that to make nice big buildings. And as you guys can probably see here, we are now using the wooden poles. I'm just trying to measure out where I should place them in order to get the maximum stability without having to have a whole lattice of wooden poles coming out of my floor. I kind of only want to have 2 to 4 in total going from floor to roof, depending on how big we have the building. And yeah, we're just trying to save a bit of time and space with doing that. We're also trying to make the building look as big as possible. Now with this building, I am thinking at some point we might even be able to add a second floor to it. It is tall enough that we could put a set of stairs off in a corner somewhere and have a second floor, but I think if we do that, we'd probably only have it for stuff like storage, so maybe like a warehouse, and then we have like an upstairs area full of chests where we keep all our like storage for particular items that we don't need tons of, or stuff that we just don't need to have access to all the time. But we will have our crafting table set up on this ground floor and our cooking station, stuff like that. We will also have some chests near those for the more key items that we're going to need throughout the playthrough, and so that we've got quick access to them, so we don't have to keep running up and down a set of stairs in order to get them from the upstairs storage. But we might cover that once we get to it. Oh god, that sky isn't looking... Oh great, it's raining. Fantastic. Great timing. So, I believe at the start of the playthrough, I think it was literally episode 1, I was talking about the cold mechanic when it got to nighttime and how it affected your stamina regeneration. Oh, if you can see that little building piece there, it's gone red because it's the furthest away from the stable pieces, and it's got a high chance of falling down, or it's got... I think if I was to build anything on top of that red piece, it would then fall down. So we're adjusting the angle of that in order to make it less likely to fall down. Again, that's why we have the wooden poles there. Although I think we're going to have to move those a bit closer, as I think anything we try and build, yeah, I think they're definitely too far away. Because that's red there. If I try to build anything up to that pole, I think it's just going to fall down again, or it's going to be too short. Oh, you can change the snapping of buildings. There you go, yeah. So I built that piece and it just fell down straight away. I do make use of the snapping options as well. You can change which corner or which angle of the build piece that you're making, or that you're placing down. You can change the angle that it snaps to, so you don't have to have it looking in the dead center of the item. You can snap it to the bottom corners or the top corners, so you don't have to always have a top-down view of the building that you're trying to place the item on in order to place it properly. So as you can see there, snapping from the bottom, so we can build a nice tall pole without having to look down on it to place the piece properly. Again, it's one of the quality of life things that they added a couple of patches into Valheim, and I was really happy that they did. It made life 10 times easier. Anyway, we were talking about the rain. So, in our first episode, we were talking about the cold mechanic, or the cold debuff, and the way it affects your stamina regeneration in a negative way. And then I mentioned that there is also a wet debuff that you can get from being in water. You can also get it from being rained on. So as you can see in our top corner on the right-hand side next to our minimap, we have the wet debuff, which lasts for 2 minutes. It's not running out either, that timer isn't going down, as obviously we're stood in the rain, so it's constantly giving us the wet debuff. This also affects your stamina regeneration in a negative way, but I don't think it's as bad as the cold debuff. I could be wrong, but I don't think it's as bad. It's just another one of those. If it's nighttime and it's raining and you don't have anything to protect yourself from the cold, then yeah, your stamina is going to regen very, very slow. That's one of the reasons why sleeping at nighttime is a very important mechanic, because yeah, you don't want to be trying to fight something and not having any stamina in order to run away or to dodge or anything like that. When it comes to your stamina regeneration, you do also need to make sure that you've got plenty of stamina as well. So we can see on the left hand side next to my health bar, my strawberry, oh my strawberry. I told you in episode 1 I was going to mix those two up. My raspberry is running low. I think it's on about 30 seconds there. So we are going to need to refresh that at some point. I don't know. We're about halfway through with the building. So we're almost there. There's little decorative pieces that I want to put on and stuff like that. But I think for the time being, we are almost there. Just making sure. And as you can see there, those top wooden roof pieces are orange instead of red now. There are a couple that are still red. It's because they don't have a roof on the other side to connect to on the wall. So we need to finish that part off first before we finish off the roof. But those two poles, those wooden poles, have increased the stability at the roof at the top. So that means the roof won't fall in on us and we are protected from the rain, which is very useful. And as you can tell, I am now starting to run out of wood. We will gain a little bit more from these little pieces we're just going to take out because I don't think we need them anymore. But yeah, we are going to have to go off and get some more wood very shortly as we are running very low. That piece of wood on that pole is really getting on my nerves. So that is one of the things that does kind of irk me a little bit when it comes to building, especially if you're building straight up, is that if you build it quite tall, but you realise you've either gone too tall or not tall enough and you need to destroy a certain piece, the wood materials that you use to build that certain piece will then sit on top of the thing that was underneath it. So if, say, like for that pole there, I knocked off the top piece, those two bits of wood just sat on the pole underneath it, and unless I was able to get close enough to it to pick them up, they were just going to sit there indefinitely. So I've had to knock the whole pole down because there's no other way for me to get up that high to pick them up. And that's obviously caused a section of our roof to fall off because the stability's disappeared, but we have now put that all back into place, and yet we have the beginnings of the other side of our roof showing up now. But I do believe we are going to need to finish off the connecting wall on the opposite side in order to get the whole roof up without it falling down. I think because it's not connected to the ground and there's no stability on that side, it's just going to keep falling down in certain sections. There we go, yeah. So as you saw there are some red pieces that will just fall down after a few seconds because I think the building kind of takes a second or two to realise that there's no stability from that piece, so there's no stability on the other side and it just falls off because there's nothing holding it up properly. So we are going to have to put our wall in on the other side, and we have now realised that we're out of wood completely, so we're going to need to go get some more. We also need to repair our things because our hammer and our axe are looking quite low on durability. So yeah, we're just going to pop back and repair those. I kind of like the shape our house is taking at the moment. It looks a little bit like a barn. It's a very basic kind of house shape. Obviously I've put the different angles of roof at the top. It was more for the stability rather than having to make it look different, but I quite like that it's almost like it curves a little bit more than anything else. Might as well just pop our fire in here. So one thing you'll notice as well that I'm doing now is I'm trying to pop the fire down, but I cannot place it on a wooden floor. Naturally, if I placed a bonfire on a wooden floor, the whole floor would set on fire. The game does kind of take that into account, although I'm not sure that putting it here is going to set the walls on fire itself. I think it's more of like a kind of like an obvious thing, like a logical thing. You can't place a fire on a wooden floor, it's just going to set the whole floor on fire. So we've had to remove the wooden flooring piece that's there in order to put the fire in the corner. But at least now we've got it, we can even get our rested buff. And another thing you might have noticed as well is that when you're stood next to an open fire like that and you've got the wet debuff timer speeds up an awful lot. Oh, there we go, we've got our rested comfort free as well, that's quite good. At least that gives us 10 minutes of rested rather than 8. But yeah, so the being stood next to a fire does make your wet debuff disappear a lot quicker. Oh, there was the second cut. That should be everything now, I believe, in terms of wood gathering that I've cut out. And there might be a little bit more later on, but I think it's only for a little bit of wood just so we can finish off a particular piece we were building on the roof. But yeah, so you can place an open fire in your house like that. You are going to need to do that in future. Obviously, if I was to try and sleep with our fire outside and it's raining like it is now, the fire would go out and we wouldn't be able to sleep because you do need an active fire near your bed in order to sleep. Again, it's part of the game's requirements, so yeah, you will need that. You might also be able to tell that the wooden floor piece that I'm stood on at the minute is a slightly different shade of colour, brown, to the rest of the floor. So wooden floor and wooden walling, if it's openly hit by rain, takes damage over time. It's not a huge amount of damage, but it will get to the point where it's very unstable and has a higher chance of breaking. And then, say if an enemy walks up and hits it once, it could break it completely. Rain does that to certain build pieces. It doesn't do it to roofing, but it does do it to wooden walls and floors. So you will have to go around using the repair hammer repairing those pieces. We're going to have to do that with these bits when we're finished. We might actually do it before if the rain stops. I'm just going to place down some chests and stuff, so we need to move all the items that were out in the way so we can finish off the building. And yeah, we just need to make sure our inventory isn't too full. So as I was mentioning in a previous episode about the carry weight mechanics, there is obviously carry weights within the game, and you do need to make sure you're paying attention to them, so that, especially if you're doing something like this where you're building, you need a high amount of wood all at once, and you don't really want anything else in your inventory taking up too much of your carry weight whilst you're trying to, carry as much wood as possible to build as much as possible. Last thing you want to do when building something is be going back and forth to your forest and stuff like that to gather more materials. There is something we can make use of later on, which I will showcase, in order to make carrying materials around a lot easier, especially the heavy materials. So let's just say you want to build a huge castle and you want thousands of bits of stone in order to do that. There is a way that you can have those bits of stone nearby without having it massively affect your carry weight and without having to go back and forth picking up pieces all the time. So like I said, we will showcase that. We're actually going to get that quite soon. It's a cart. It's basically just a wooden board and some wheels, but it's a cart that you can actually attach to your character and pull it along. So it does make farming some heavier items a lot easier, especially stuff like minerals and ores and stuff like that for metal. So yeah, I will showcase that when we get to it. And you can probably see it a bit clearer there. The wooden floor pieces are a bit of a different shade of colour. And the reason you can tell the actual durability on them when I'm hovering over them with the hammer. There is, where my crosshair is, just to the right of it, there's that little yellow bar. When I'm hovering over some of the pieces, you can tell that the little yellow bar is a little bit like empty. That's the durability, or like the health of the item. So you can tell those bits of floor that have been in the rain for the entire evening, they are about a third of the way down. And then obviously we're just using the repair tool on the hammer to repair all those bits. I'm just repairing all of them just to make sure they're all done and dusted. Last thing we want to do, like I said, last thing we'd like to do is come home from a big farm and have half our building falling down because it's been rained on for a couple of days. And now we're just going to crack on with the rest of the roof. I think I've actually forgotten that I need to finish off the wall segments before I can actually put the rest of the roof on. But I think we're just more checking that the durability is okay. Yep, there we go. I'm going to put the walls in on this side. Not as big as I wanted, but it's still a pretty roomy building. This should handle our crafting needs for the time being. There are other bits and pieces that we're going to have to build, but we will be able to have those placed outside rather than inside, so it'll make life a little bit easier for us. You don't have to have all of your crafting and gathering and stuff like that. You won't have to have all of it placed in the buildings, so you're not going to have like a huge town. You could always build a huge town if you really wanted to, but there are some bits that you can have placed outside and they will still work and still operate correctly. You don't have to worry about the rain cancelling them, stuff like that. Here we go. We do need to go back into the forest and gather a bit more wood. I think this is the part I didn't cut out, so I do apologise that you are going to have to sit and watch me cut some trees down for a little bit. Not too much. We are nearly finished with the building. Like I said, there's a few decorative pieces we need to put on just to make it look a bit better, but we are getting there in terms of finished. There's probably about 10 minutes left, I would imagine. I'm just going to cut some wood down, and I have absolutely completely forgotten to get my torch out whilst doing this, so again, I do apologise like I had to say in episode 1. Oh, there's another grayling. Bugger off. I've completely forgotten that I need to be holding a torch when doing this. You can hold a torch while chopping trees down. Your torch will be held in your left hand while you're cutting down with the right. So you can hold a torch whilst doing stuff like this, and obviously whilst exploring and things. I think you can even have your shield out as well when you're holding a torch so that you can combat things like graylings and stuff like that and explore and not get killed whilst you're running around. But yeah, I do have to apologise. We have forgotten to do that. We will have to make sure that we're paying attention. Again, apologies if you can hear my chair. I am shifting about a little bit. This is a very creaky chair. I kind of need to upgrade myself. Probably the reason why I've been sucking on Apex a lot recently is I don't have a proper gaming chair. It's just this old leather piece of poo. It's terrible. I hate my chair. I've slept in it more times than I can count. I've probably slept in that chair more times than I've slept in my actual bed. But yeah, I'm just going to cut some more wood and go back and finish the house. And there is day 7. Okay, so looks like we didn't actually need our torch pulled out for that much time. Although we probably should remember to do it a bit earlier. But we do now have the daytime on us, so the cold debuff will disappear, which means our stamina should regen nice and quick. Although we're not going to need too much more for the rest of the building that we need to do. We are literally just adding the finishing touches now. There isn't much else that we need to do. There is one thing I will need to add to the building, which you will see me add a bit later on, which is that I need to put a chimney on the top of the building if I want to have the building completely enclosed. So when you are placing fires inside a building, obviously I've covered that you need to have a fire inside and have it lit if you want to sleep nearby, and it's obviously better to have them inside rather than outside because the rain will put them out. If you want to have that fire inside, but your building is completely enclosed, there's no open parts, smoke will rise from the fire and it will fill up the building, and if the building is small enough, or if there's enough fire and enough smoke, so you can probably see it coming out the side of the building there, if there is enough fire and enough smoke, it will actually start choking your character and you will start taking a small amount of damage. It is constant damage as well, a little bit like the freezing damage from the mountain, so a chimney is something I would recommend doing, having on any building, or again, you could always have like the top corners of the roof being a little bit open so that the smoke could always filter out through there. But again, I'm going for a bit more of a thematic build with this one, so we'll try and have a chimney on the roof. They're not too difficult to build, actually quite simple. But now that we have this wall built on the other side, we've even put our little doorway. Technically that is a gate, but I like having a nice big door instead of the standard one. The standard door for me just feels a bit too small. I feel like I'm always going to bash my character's head whenever we walk in the front door, so yeah, I prefer going for the actual like barn door option instead. You can have 2 of them placed side by side and have these big swinging doors that open. I prefer having the one, especially for having it match up to the center of the wall that we've got placed here. And now we are just going to place a couple of bits up at the top here. Obviously you can see we've got a few of those triangular gaps where we can't really fit anything. There are pieces that we can use to put in there. I think I don't actually put them in straight away. I think I completely forget that they're an option, and I actually just decide to put these little smaller squares in instead. It doesn't look that bad when you look at it, but I didn't want it to be open. I didn't want the rain to come in and start affecting our fire or damaging the floor and walls. So yeah, I think for now I start putting in these little square bits, and they don't look great. They're still leaving holes, but I think a little bit later on I do kind of look at the build menu and think, oh yes, I can put these little bits in here. And then that's what prompts me to then put the chimney on the roof, because obviously we can see the smoke coming out the side there on that left-hand side of the building, so we do need to sort that out, put the chimney on, make sure the building's got a vent for the smoke to escape from, so we're not choking ourselves in our sleep. Ah, there we go. We've realised that we've got these little angular shaped parts that we can put on the side of a building to fill in those kind of triangular shapes and make it look all nice and neat. I really like the way these look, actually. I'm surprised that I forgot, but I will say it has been several months since I last played Valheim. I did a big playthrough in Ashlands. I did one initial playthrough with a friend on his world, and then we did a 4-player multiplayer server that we had completely online with the 4 of us, and I really enjoyed both of those, especially the 4-player multiplayer server that we did. We had so many cool buildings, and we had we had a massive base. It looked like a town more than an actual few buildings. It was great. But sadly, we kind of stopped playing that for several months, and I didn't want to pay the server cost to keep it running. And I'm not exactly amazingly IT literate when it comes to stuff like servers and save files and stuff, so I never actually kept the save file for that server. I really wish I had, because we've lost a lot of progress, and we even actually took over a few bits and pieces from our single-player worlds and the other world that I was on with my friend, and we lost a lot of our good stuff. So yeah, I was kind of kicking myself for not doing that. Maybe there's a way that they actually keep the world file. I don't think that they do. The website that I use for hosting a multiplayer server, I think it's Nitrado. I can't remember exactly who it was. I'll probably have a look at it in future. Maybe we can resurrect that server. That would be pretty cool. Get it upgraded for Ashlands. But yeah, it was just a bit of a shame to lose that. Now we're just going to add on these final finishing touches. And as I said, we are also going to need to add on a chimney as well, because now that we're filling in these gaps on the side of the roof, there is going to be a lot of smoke building up inside. I don't think there'll be enough smoke to actually choke us. I think it might just kind of seep out of the gaps in the roof and stuff like that. There's like kind of smaller gaps because you can kind of see smoke filtering out from them. I think it'd be all right even if we were to leave it completely sealed, but I think again, just for more thematic purposes, having a chimney would be pretty cool. I think it'd look pretty good. So yeah, we're gonna get some more wood and stick a chimney on there. But we are getting pretty close to finishing it. It's looking very good. Like I said, it does look a little bit like a barn, but I'm quite enjoying the way it looks at the minute. Nice and big, lots of space. We haven't put our bed down, but we can do that in a second. We've got some chests on one side for all of our materials. We've got a campfire on the other side. I am going to move that campfire at some point as well. I think we'll leave it there for the time being, but I am going to move that at some point when I want to have a bit more of a roomy cooking area. Because with the campfire being in the corner like that, there is a corner of the building that isn't affected by the warmth from the fire, or we won't be able to have our bed over there, so I will move that at some point. And obviously we're going to have to build a small ladder to get onto the roof in order to build this chimney. And then I realise that we run out of wood, or we're very low on wood, so we start building the chimney and then realise, oh, I need some more wood. Chimneys are nice and easy to build. You can just remove a section of the actual roof itself and then build a few like wooden walls around that bit and then stick another section of roof on top of that, but leaving one side open, which then means that you've got a nice open kind of funnel out of the top which all the smoke can go through. So yeah, you will see a little bit of smoke still in the building, but it does filter out quite nicely and keeps the building nice and free from smoke, because in the way that it also deals damage to you and chokes you, but it also kind of looks a bit horrible as well if a building's quite full of smoke. Makes it difficult to see things and stuff like that. It's just not a kind of the same as it is in real life. It's just not a nice thing. So get this chimney built, get it finished, get all the pieces put back in, put our bed down, and then we'll be able to crack on with the rest of our Meadows playthrough. Meadows playthrough? Sorry, Valheim playthrough. I don't want to be in the meadows the whole time. If you remember from our previous episode, we did have a bit of a coverage of what we were going to do in the future. Obviously, the building was one of the main ones, but we do still have some little bits left to do in the meadows. Killing Eikthyr is the main important part, but I kind of want to leave that till the very end. There are a couple of other bits that we need to do, but they are bits that we only really have a chance of finding them. So the crypts and the bees, those are the two important parts that I want to cover before we leave the meadows, but I don't want to spend too much time running around exploring to try and find those bits. We can find them passively as we're exploring and progressing, so if it gets to the point where we can't find them and we've explored for a bit further and we can't find any, or haven't found any in that time, we will just progress from the meadows to the Black Forest and then just kind of hope that in future exploration we will find the bits that we need. We will obviously dedicate some time to finding those bits too, but I don't want to waste hours and hours trying to find bees. Obviously, we've been quite unfortunate with our current exploration, so I don't want to waste too much time on that. There we are. Just stick these wooden bits in here. Stick that one on the side there, put one on the other side, and then obviously we leave this side on the right open, and then we stick a wooden roof, quite a small angled part. Put that there, come on, snap, there we go, and then we get the decorative bit we use to fill in the gaps on the sides. We could leave it open, but again, going for more thematic and more like making it look good, and obviously we're looking at the build piece there and it's orange, so we're not at risk of it falling down. Put that bit on that side, put one here, come on, snap in the corner, perfect, there we go, and there is our chimney, and we can see the smoke coming out of it already, so it's naturally working, fantastic. And there we go, our barn now looks a little bit more like a house, and then we can fill in that little gap there, and we don't have to have a big window. I will probably put a window in at some point. I'd prefer having windows on the side of a building so that we can tell whether it's daytime or not. But yeah, that is pretty much everything for this. I think this is where we're going to end it. So thank you for everybody for enduring my Let's Build episode. This one was a bit long, but thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you in the next episode.